Hello, CP students. This is Mr. Angelozzi. As all of you know, we are out of school. Coronavirus has hit. So I'm trying to find creative ways to still teach you, even though we're not seeing each other every day. So what I'm going to try to do is once or twice a week, I'm going to try to record a video lesson. Just give you guys a little review of the things that I've had you do throughout the week. So I'm going to call this my week one review. I'm going to take a few minutes. I'm going to go over a group of guys called Mountain Men. I'm going to go over a president named James K. Polk. And I'm going to go over a concept called Manifest Destiny. So let's move on. So everybody, the first thing we're going to talk about here today is Mountain Men. We just got done watching The Revenant, uh, kind of a brutal movie, survival movie. But what it did was it showed you these group of rugged guys who roam the Rocky Mountains and hunted for a living. So I just want to illustrate a few things about these mountain men, the real men who existed. So the first thing I want to draw your attention to is this guy right here. So obviously, if you're a mountain man, the main goal of roaming the Rocky Mountains would be to go and make money. So in The Revenant, we see a lot of mention of grizzly bears, but you also heard like references to the pelts. And there's a lot in the movie. The guy Fitzgerald keeps talking about, well, if I can't get these pelts, I can't make a living. So those pelts or that fur, it was coming from beaver. And the reason why those animals were so sought after was because in Europe, rich people wore beaver hats made out of fur. So basically, because it was a high luxury item, basically the men who went out to the Rocky Mountains to actually trap the beaver could do very well financially for themselves. What these mountain men would do was they would set these metal traps, and then they would put like some beaver scent in there, and then when the poor little beaver came in, the trap would close, and basically when the mountain man would come check the trap, there would be a dead beaver in there. They would skin it, and then they would collect the pelts. Okay, so let's move on from there. All right, let's look over to the right side of the screen. I want you to look here. That was the go-to gun of the mountain man. So the brand of gun was called the Hawken rifle. So this was like a 50 caliber gun. They called it a buffalo rifle. And this thing's taken out a buffalo or a grizzly bear. So these guys weren't messing around when it came to their hunting weapons. Additionally, I know my face is in the way here. I apologize. But right here, if you were a mountain man, you also needed a knife. So once you killed an animal, you needed to skin it. And the go-to knife for a mountain man was called the Bowie knife. So it kind of had like a very sharp tip that you could use to skin an animal. So that's pretty straightforward. All right. If we move on here where it says the physical/personality traits of a mountain man, these mountain men were like burly guys, big beards. They wore like animal skins. But I really want to focus in on where it says personality traits. If you're the kind of person who's going to leave civilized society and roam the Rocky Mountains with a group of guys for months or years at a time, chances are you were probably a loner. And not only that, you were the kind of person that you would have to go without seeing another human being possibly for weeks or months at a time. If two mountain men ran into each other and one was out of food or one needed medical care, even though you didn't know the person, you would help them. So that's kind of like the kind of personality that these guys had. If you look at that kind of weird R word, that's a French word. That word is rendezvous. So if you were a mountain man, you'd go trapping for like 6 months at a time. And then when you had all your furs, they would set designated meeting points in the Rockies. So mountain men from all over would bring their furs that they caught to what was called a rendezvous. So a rendezvous is like a meetup. They would get together, they'd hang out, they'd drink, they'd party. They'd have fun for a week. They'd get their money from selling their furs. And then basically they'd head out and trap again. So for the mountain man, the rendezvous was making the money, but it was also a chance to socialize with other mountain men. So if you move down where it says the decline of the fur trade, right? This era of the American mountain man, it was really only like a 20-year period from 1820 to 1840. What happened was by the 1840s, a lot of the animals were gone from overtrapping. And then additionally, those beaver pelt hats that, those rich European people wore, they went out of fashion. Just like anything else, things aren't in fashion forever. Our big significance here is these mountain men who roamed the Rockies. They were the ones who mapped, even though they went out there for money, they were the ones who mapped the Western geography. So in the 1840s, people started taking wagons to California and Oregon, like the famous Oregon Trail. And the reason why those trails existed was because mountain men had basically mapped them out. All right, everybody, let's now move to the politics of national expansion. So the 1840s is sort of the decade that's most known in American history for expansion. So among the public and among politicians, there's this desire to be able to move farther west. So that's kind of reflected in the politics of the era. So the first party we should talk about is the Democratic Party. So most of you probably remember this guy, probably one of the more polarizing presidents in American history, Andrew Jackson, elected in 1828, then serves 8 years as president into the 1830s. So Jackson has very defined political beliefs, one of which is to create more opportunities for common white men. So part of Jackson's ideology is that there should always be opportunities for common men, and that America should try to increase in size. So when Jackson's done being president, this urge to expand, remains a major part of the Democratic Party. So if we look at this guy here next to Jackson, that's James K. Polk. And in 1844, James K. Polk is the Democratic nominee for president. And we'll get back to James K. Polk in a minute, but just know that James K. Polk is kind of following in the footsteps of Jackson. Let's now move on to the Whig Party. So the Democrats as a party wanted America to expand. The Whigs weren't as interested in expansion. The Whigs basically thought that we should use the economic resources of America to improve our economy in the areas we already owned. So things like building roads, building canals, building railroads, these federal infrastructure projects to make our economy more interconnected and higher profits for industry, things like that. So now let's get back to this Polk guy. So in 1844, you have James K. Polk running for, as a Democrat for president. So Andrew Jackson's nickname was Old Hickory. So as a result, James K. Polk's nickname was Young Hickory. James K. Polk considered himself the guy who was going to finish what Jackson started. So basically everything that Jackson supported, Native American removal, anti-debt, pro-expansion, James K. Polk openly embraced all of these ideas supported by Jackson. So if you move forward to the 1844 presidential election, basically Polk keeps his promises very simple. His biggest promise, though, is that he says, hey, as a country, we're going to take the land that we're going to take sort of the country that we are, the country that goes halfway across the continent. So let me draw you a quick picture. So if you look at this map here, this is kind of the boundary of where the United States owns land. And if you look, we only have states in this area, right? So if you're Polk, you're looking at this land here. And in the 1844, that land belonged to Mexico. So Mexico had become an independent country in 1821. So now it's 20 years later. So basically, if you're James K. Polk, you said, hey, this land here, I'm going to make that a part of the United States. I'm going to make America bigger. Okay? And what we're going to learn later in the chapter is that Polk is actually successful in this. Okay, so this next concept, manifest destiny, is really the most important concept of the chapter. So basically, to break it down in a nutshell, manifest destiny was the belief in the 1840s that it was America's destiny, or it was America's fate, to go from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. Remember, we were not a continental nation at that time. I think when you talk about this topic, you have to discuss what the words fate and destiny mean. They are tied to God. So basically, in a nutshell, manifest destiny is the belief that God wanted America to go from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. So it's sort of like America is this chosen country by God, that land belongs to us. Now, some Americans like that idea. Like, some Americans believe that America is exceptional. Yes, we are special. Yes, we are better than other countries, and we should own land. Other people are a little bit more some people are more like conflicted with this and say, well, what makes America more special than Mexico or, our neighbors, other countries like that? So be aware, there is like an attitude that with manifest destiny that we are the best, we deserve everything. America, should go all the way to the Pacific Ocean. It doesn't matter who owns the land now, we should own it. So be aware that that land that Polk says that we should, take over or take control of, at the time, that was initially Spanish territory, but then after 1821 became Mexican territory. And remember, both Spain and Mexico were Catholic, and America was a Protestant country. So in America in the 1840s, there was a lot of hatred towards Catholic people. So it kind of just helped fuel the public fervor for the idea that as a country, we should go take land from those evil Catholics out there along the Pacific Ocean. Not only that, but there were a lot of people in America, farmers, railroad companies, business owners, who knew that the bigger that America got and the farther we expanded west, the more money that they would make. So a lot of Americans had dollar signs in their eyes when the topic of expansion came up. That I word there, that's a word that you definitely want to know. It comes up over and over again in history, American history too. That word is called imperialism. So imperialism is when you conquer and take over another place. It's sort of like using your might to beat somebody up and take what they have. And imperialism is kind of under the belief that, well, if you're bigger and stronger, you deserve to be able to, beat somebody up and take what they have. So we knew as a country that America was a lot stronger than Mexico. So a lot of Americans said, well, if we're going to fight a war, let's beat up Mexico and take something from them. So that was a big part of manifest destiny as well, right? So the last slide, we talked about the Whigs and Democrats and their views on expansion. Democrats are pro-expansion. The Whigs are more about focusing on other things. I would also know that during the 1840s, America expands in three ways. So first, right before James K. Polk takes over as president, the president before him, John Tyler, decides to add Texas as a state in our country. So Polk's not technically the president yet, but some historians give him credit. They say that after he got elected, they knew that, Polk was going to add Texas anyway, so why not add it? So we're going to give Texas to Polk. And then secondly, Oregon. So the Oregon country was a place that was being shared between Britain and the United States. We call that area today the Pacific Northwest. We added the Oregon country, we called it. Today that's the modern day states of Washington and Oregon. And most importantly, by the time that Polk is done being president, we add California and the whole Southwest. So we're talking about, New Mexico, parts of New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, Utah, and we won that as a result of beating Mexico in a war called the Mexican War. All right, everybody, we're going to wrap up this little weekend review with looking at a picture. So this is a very famous painting in American history. The title of this painting is called American Progress. And this is a painting that really depicts views about manifest destiny and expansion. So I want to point out a few things to you. So the first thing I want to point out to you is our angel, All right, so you look at this painting, you see the angel. In this painting, the angel is supposed to represent America. And there are two things that you notice about this here. All right. She's got a book in one hand, which, you would assume that it would be a Bible, right? And she's got this cord in her other hand, right? And if you remember back from our previous chapter, these poles and these cords, that was for a telegraph machine, right? So the significance here is that this angel is America. And this angel is taking religious beliefs and technology to the West. And if you look at this side of the screen, the right side of the screen, you'll see like railroads, you'll see wagons, you'll see farmers, and most importantly, on this side of the screen, you see light. So light typically represents, goodness, things like that. So there's definitely a color symbolism in this painting, because if you look at the other side of the screen, right, you'll see darkness, right? You see buffalo running. And most importantly, you see Native Americans who are like running away from the settlers. So there's this idea that as America is moving west, they're sort of bringing technology and farming and the light, the goodness, to the west. I would guarantee that if you were to ask a Native American if they had this opinion during that era, they probably would have said no. But once again, Manifest Destiny was the view that America deserved to move west, and not everybody agreed with that. So on that note, everybody, that is my week in review. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. Who knows how long we're going to be out of school with this coronavirus. So like I said, once or twice a week, I'll try to do this for you, to keep myself occupied, but also to give you something a little bit more personal. All right, everybody, take care of yourselves, and we'll see you soon.